right. So, we've got a ton of stuff here about this earthquake. News reports, scientific summaries, even some advisories. It's a 7.6 magnitude in the Caribbean Sea. Like, that's got to be big, right?
Yeah, big one.
But the crazy thing is, no one's saying anything about damage. Like, I'm not seeing any reports of damage, which I got to admit is a little confusing. So I guess that's why we're doing this deep dive.
Right, sure.
To try to understand, like, what exactly is going on with this earthquake.
It is a very interesting one. A lot to unpack with this one. A lot to learn, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, let's start with just, like, the very basics, when and where this thing actually hit.
For sure.
So it was February 8th, 2025 at 6:23 p.m. Eastern Time. About 129 miles southwest of Georgetown in the Cayman Islands.
Yeah.
So is that the reason why maybe we're not seeing all this damage? Like, it's just so far out in the sea?
I mean, yeah, that's a huge part of it. It's way out there.
Yeah.
But there's more to it than that. I mean, to really understand, like you said, we got to look at the earthquake itself. This one happened along what we call a strike slip fault.
Yeah.
Probably the Swan Islands transform fault, where the North American and Caribbean plates meet.
Right. So, I mean, you probably remember the 2010 Haiti earthquake.
Oh, for sure.
Totally different, I know, but still in that same area.
Yeah.
And I mean, am I picturing this right? Like, just these massive plates kind of grinding past each other horizontally.
Exactly, yeah. They're sliding past each other. And when you say 7.6 magnitude, that's a rupture zone. It's huge.
Yeah.
Like roughly 140 kilometers long and 20 kilometers wide.
Wow.
That's a lot of movement down there.
That is massive. I mean, that's way bigger than I was picturing in my head. It's crazy that something like that didn't just, like, wreck everything.
Yeah, no, it is. But that's one of the things about strike slip faults.
Okay.
They can make really strong earthquakes, but they don't usually cause those massive tsunamis like the other types, like subduction zones.
Right. But, I mean, even with the strike slip, you're still going to have some kind of tsunami threat.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, anything that shifts the seafloor that abruptly, especially something as powerful as this earthquake, it's going to move some serious water, And that's why we saw those tsunami advisories go out for Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, Cuba, Honduras, and the Cayman Islands.
Makes sense. But then I read that some of those got canceled pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Especially for, like, Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. Why was that?
Well, as they got more data in, it became clear that the risk for those areas wasn't as bad as they first thought.
Gotcha.
Those advisories, they're based on the early information. So as scientists get more data, they can update those warnings, make them more accurate.
So it's all about, like, staying updated, right?
Yes,
Making sure you're following those changes as they come out.
For sure. Because you see, the Caribbean, it sits on this really complicated network of smaller plates. And they're constantly moving and bumping into each other, which is why you get so many earthquakes there. So you got to stay vigilant and prepared, even if the initial threat seems to go away.
Okay, that makes sense. So even though the risk was lower than they initially thought, I'm still curious about, like, what they actually saw. Were there actually any decent sized waves?
Well, the biggest one they recorded was only like a 1.2-inch rise in sea level at Isla Mujeres, an island off the coast of Mexico.
Okay.
It's not much, but technically anything that raises sea level from an earthquake is considered a tsunami.
Interesting.
Even if it's not like those massive, Hollywood movie waves.
Right. So it wasn't a monster wave, but it was still a pretty big deal.
Exactly, because even those small rises can cause strong currents and unpredictable water movements near the shore. And it definitely got the attention of the Cayman Islands government. They told everyone to move inland because of the tsunami threat. They weren't taking any chances.
Yeah, no kidding. It's just wild to me how, even with it being so far out there, and with the type of fault it was, there's still all these potential dangers. Like, it's not just a simple earthquake. It's all this other stuff, too.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely something that scientists are going to be looking at for a long time.
I bet. So, I think the thing that I'm finding so interesting is you hear 7.6 magnitude earthquake, and you immediately think, oh, my God, it's going to be terrible. But then when you look closer, you see how all these different factors, like the location and the way the plates moved, can actually make it a totally different type of event.
Absolutely, yeah. It really shows you how dynamic our planet is.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, well, I'm definitely interested to hear more about, like, the scientific stuff. Like, what does this actually mean for the region?
Well, one of the things that really jumps out is...
But we've talked about how this earthquake, even though it was so big, didn't really cause much damage.
Right.
But I'm curious about the ripple effects. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like beyond just the immediate stuff.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, even without a ton of physical damage, this whole thing really reminds us that the Caribbean is vulnerable to earthquakes. It's kind of a wake-up call, you know? It makes us look at our building codes, our early warning systems, how prepared we are for a disaster.
You know, it's funny you say that, and I think about those earthquake drills we used to do in school. It always felt kind of like we were just going through the motions, but now I see it's like a real threat, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just about each person being ready. It's about being resilient as a whole community.
Yeah.
Governments, communities, people, we got to all work together to be ready for something like this.
Right, yeah. And speaking of communities, I'm thinking about the Cayman Islands. They depend so much on tourism. Even without damage, wouldn't this whole thing impact them?
Oh, yeah, you're right. To think about that, the economic side of things, even if nothing got destroyed, you've got those tsunami warnings, and people are going to be nervous. Could be canceled trips, or maybe tourists just choose to go somewhere else.
Right, so even something relatively small can still have a big impact in a bunch of different ways.
Exactly. And that feeling, that uncertainty, it can stick around even after the danger is gone. Getting people to trust that it's safe again, that's part of recovery too.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm also curious about, like, the news, you know?
Yeah.
How did the media cover all this? Do you think that shaped how people saw it?
The media plays a big role, that's for sure. At first, everyone was super urgent, which, you know, makes sense when you think a tsunami might be coming.
Right.
But then, as we got more information, it shifted to explaining the science behind it and emphasizing how important it is to be prepared.
So it went from, like, freaking out to actually being helpful, kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That change is really important because it moves us away from being scared and towards understanding and doing something about it. And that's hard, especially with social media where everything spreads so fast.
Right. People need to know what's going on, not just to react in the moment, but to actually push for things like better infrastructure and preparedness, long-term stuff.
Exactly. This earthquake is a perfect example of why that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've covered a lot. The science, the impact, even the things we still don't know about this earthquake.
Right.
But what about the things we still need to figure out? What are scientists still working on?
Well, for one thing, they're still figuring out exactly how this rupture happened.
Okay.
They're looking at the seismic waves, mapping out the fault zone, trying to understand why this earthquake didn't cause a bigger tsunami. I mean, you'd think it would have, right?
Yeah, seems kind of backwards. Huge earthquake, small impact. I bet that'll keep scientists busy for a while.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Every earthquake teaches us something new. In this case, they're looking at how the tsunami spread, comparing that to what their models predicted, and trying to figure out why some places saw a bigger rise in sea level than others.
So it's like they're putting together a puzzle, and each new piece of information helps them see the bigger picture more clearly.
That's a great way to put it. And all that knowledge they're gaining could help them make better tsunami predictions and warning systems, not just in the Caribbean, but everywhere.
That's amazing. It really shows how connected everything is. What happens in one place can affect the whole world.
Exactly. It reminds us that we're living on a planet that's constantly changing, and understanding these events is crucial for building a safer and stronger future.
That idea, being stronger, being resilient, I want to explore that more.
Yeah.
What does that really mean? Not just surviving, but actually doing well in a world where these things happen.
That's a question we'll get into right after this. Resiliences.
Okay, so, we've gone through like the science, the impact, and all the questions that are still kind of hanging out there about this earthquake.
Yeah.
But I'm not really stuck on this whole resilience thing. It seems like it's more than just like bouncing back.
Right. It's more about like adapting.
Yeah.
Changing.
Yeah. It's like you're not ignoring the threat. You're not pretending it's not there, but you're figuring out how to live with it,
Exactly. And it's not just one thing. It's a whole bunch of stuff we have to do. Like, we got to make our buildings stronger, earthquake-resistant structures, maybe build seawalls to protect coastal communities. And those early warning systems, those are super important.
Yeah, that's like, what is it, like giving our communities an immune system or something to help them handle these big shocks.
That's a great way to put it. But it's more than just the physical stuff. It's also our social and economic systems.
Right.
We have to build strong communities, have good emergency plans, and not put all our eggs in one basket, like tourism, which can be wiped out pretty easily.
So it's like building a support system.
Right.
Where everyone can lean on each other when things get tough.
Exactly. And maybe even more important is each person being prepared.
Right.
People got to know the risks, have their emergency kits ready, and know what to do when something bad happens.
It makes you feel like you have some control, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're not just a victim, you can actually do something to get ready.
Absolutely. And when everyone does their part, it creates a stronger community that can handle just about anything.
So let's say someone's been listening to us this whole time. They're following along. What can they actually do to be more prepared? I mean, even if they're not living right on a fault line, there's always some kind of risk out there.
That's true, yeah. Disasters can happen anywhere. A good place to start is figuring out what's most likely to happen where you live.
Okay.
Hurricanes, floods, wildfires. You got to know what you're up against so you can get ready the right way.
Yeah, no point in having sandbags if you live on top of a mountain.
Exactly. So if you are in an earthquake zone, make sure your heavy furniture is secure, know how to shut off the gas and water, and know the safest spots in your home.
Okay.
If hurricanes are a threat, then have an evacuation plan and a good hurricane kit ready to go.
And I bet communication is key no matter what. Having a plan to connect with your family and friends is super important during an emergency.
Absolutely. Have someone out of town you can all call, memorize important numbers, and maybe even use one of those family communication apps.
It's smart. It's like building a safety net of information so you're not lost in the chaos.
Exactly. And don't forget about a go bag with essentials: water, food, meds, copies of important papers, a flashlight, the basics.
All good tips. It's amazing how even small things can make you feel so much more ready and in control.
It really can. And remember, places like the Red Cross and FEMA have a ton of information. They can give you advice for your specific area about getting ready for all sorts of disasters.
This earthquake, even though it didn't cause a ton of damage, really makes you think,
Yeah.
Not just about what's going on under the ground, but also about how strong we can be, how resilient we can be as people. It's like we're all in this together. And being prepared isn't just about saving yourself. It's about building a community that can handle anything.
That's a great way to put it.
So to everyone listening out there, think about some of the stuff we talked about. Even something small can make a difference. Being prepared, understanding what could happen, that's how we make a stronger world.
Absolutely. We live on a planet that's always changing, and we can't stop these things from happening, but we can definitely learn to live with them safer and better.
Yeah. And you know what? Never stop exploring.
Yeah.
Keep asking questions. Keep learning. Stay curious. That's what it's all about.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right, that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Keep exploring.